Hey, what's up guys? John here. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, just issued a warning saying that food shortages, food insecurity, and food prices are about to go up. They're just going to skyrocket. Things are going to get out of control. And when Larry Fink says something, I pay attention, mainly because, yeah, they have 10 or 11 trillion in assets under management. They have more of an influence politically, geopolitically. They have more money and more control than nearly any other company in the world, right? If, for example, I recently invested in a company I don't know, 8 months ago. They're located in South Korea. And who's the largest shareholder? It's BlackRock, right? BlackRock and Vanguard. They're the largest shareholder of basically everything. And when you look up any company, you look at who their biggest shareholders are, and you'll see that it's going to be either BlackRock or Vanguard, right? And right now, what are we seeing? We're seeing the CEO of BlackRock warning about food shortages, food insecurity. And sometimes I feel like they issue these warnings publicly because, you know, why would he care? Why would he say anything? It's not going to be a problem for him. But I feel like sometimes they issue these forecasts, these warnings. So people are like, okay, whatever, not a big deal. And then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they're like, see, we walked into a disaster. If only you would have listened to me. Back when I issued this warning in July, we could have saved X amount of people. We could have done this and we could have done that. But because you didn't listen, everything fell apart. Now, if you listen to me now, you follow my advice, you follow my guidance, I will save you and I'll save everyone from walking into this disaster. But you have to listen to me. You have to take my guidance and allow me to steer the ship. Because if you don't, things are going to get really bad. And then people are like, okay, well, you did issue the warning last time and we didn't listen. And because of that, we walked into this nightmare scenario. And so maybe we just do that. Then they just steer the ship into the direction that's going to be best for BlackRock or best for one of these corporations, right? This is what he's saying. And I think it's worth everyone paying attention to it because this, I think, is actually going to be a real scenario. I really do think that there's no turning back from this. It's going to happen 100%. Mainly because we're eating last year's food production right now. We're eating last year's food production, and we just connect the dots everywhere. I don't see how we avoid this. The one thing I worry about that we don't talk enough about is food, says Larry Fink, right? The sharp spikes in oil and metal prices after Russia's invasion of Ukraine have distracted investors from the long-lasting and more dangerous impact of food inflation. The one thing that I worry about that we don't talk enough about is food, he told the Financial Times in an interview. This isn't just about inflation concerns. There's also geopolitical concerns that result from this. The price of oil, gasoline, fertilizer, agricultural products shot up earlier this year when the Western nations imposed sanctions on Russia after its invasion of Ukraine. Wheat and sunflower oil costs were also hit hard because of Ukraine is a major exporter. Oil prices have begun to drop back this week to pre-invasion levels as traders brace for sharper drop-offs in demand, but food price inflation remains high. U.S. Consumer Price Index figures for June show that the price of chicken and flour are each up close to 20% from a year earlier, and margarine is up 34%. There has been, we talk about gas prices because that's what affects Americans, but the bigger issue is food, Fink said. There's been tremendous destruction of arable land in Ukraine. Globally, the cost of fertilizer is up almost 100%, and the additional cost is reducing the amount of fertilizer used in farming. That is harming the quality of crops worldwide. Although lower crude oil prices have started to feed through the prices at the pump for motorists, consumer price companies are continuing to see high input costs. Any drop in fertilizer prices is likely to come too late to boost this year's food harvest. The World Bank forecast after the invasion that global food prices would rise 20% this year. 20% this year. They're saying that real inflation right now is 9.1%, right? And many would argue, no, it's probably 20% or 25%, right? So if they're saying 9.1%, many are arguing that it's 25%. And if they're saying 20%, you simply do the math. 2.5 times what today's inflation would be, right? So maybe we're seeing inflation, food inflation, 55, 70% if the numbers, match over well, like they do right now, right? If everything continues at their current data to this new data, then it looks like we're going to start to see some real issues because there's going to be so much money chasing so little food that the dollar is just not going to buy what people think it's going to buy. The impact is particularly grim in Africa, which usually imports grain from Ukraine, as well as producing its own food. Fertilizer prices have also risen 300%, and the continent is facing a shortage of 2 million metric tons, according to the African Development Bank. Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, said on Friday that the world was facing an extremely difficult time for global food security and urged the G20 leading nations to halt stockpiling and export restrictions on food and provide additional financial assistance to countries and people struggling with food insecurities. Now, with that being said, today's paid sponsor is thesolutionevent.com. Thesolutionevent.com. They believe food shortages are going to be a real problem, and the best solution is a community with food, with options, working as a unit to combat the problems. And they're working aggressively to do just that. For more information, they're having a free event very soon at thesolutionevent.com. All you have to do is put your email in, and you'll get updated, and you'll have access to the free event. So thesolutionevent.com. Bill Gates, the philanthropist and Microsoft co-founder, flagged similar concerns this week, saying that the reduction in supply in wheat, edible oils, and other foods caused the war in Ukraine was driving up food prices, which will increase malnutrition and instability in lower income countries. He noted in a blog post that improving agricultural productivity in Africa required far more investment. Now, when they say far more investment, what they mean is far more investment in the way that which we say to invest the money. And the way that they want maybe the money to be invested might not be what the farmers want, may not be what the people want, right? This isn't just, we just go back to how things were. No. Invest in this new way. Invest in this new option. People might not like this option. Bill Gates, he's a man of options. For example, he has 270,000 acres farmland throughout America. He just bought a $13.5 million potato growing farm. It's about 2,100 acres just last week, right? And so he just got approval last week. A lot of people know about this. And so we look at this, right? Fertilizer prices are skyrocketing. Gates owns 270,000 acres. I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm just simply saying he owns a lot of farmland, right? We're seeing farmers get hit all over the world in every which direction. For example, look at the Netherlands, right? This plan in practice means that in certain areas, farmers have to reduce their nitrogen emissions by 70%. That means they simply have to quit. Proposal to sharply cut nitrogen emissions is tied to a 2019 Dutch court decision forcing the nation's government to take more aggressive measures to curb nitrogen emissions. The Netherlands, though, has heavily regulated agricultural emissions since the 1990s, and farmers have largely complied with such rules. The Netherlands emits a large quantity of nitrogen because of its massive agriculture industry, which accounts for about 87% of the country's 124 million kilograms of annual ammonia emissions, the FSA report showed. The nation exported a whopping $26.8 billion worth of food products, despite having a relatively tiny population compared to other major producers. Now, I did not know this. A couple weeks ago, how much food the Netherlands produces. I knew that they produced a lot, but I didn't know that they produced this much. This tiny, tiny nation is producing so much food. And if they fall, we're all going to feel it. There's no way we don't. It's not very rational to curb the Dutch agriculture if you realize that they have the highest production per acre in the world, and therefore the environmental load per kilogram of food is lower than elsewhere. A Dutch journalist and chemist told Fox News, so in a sense, the Dutch agriculture is a benefit for the climate as well as biodiversity. Experts also argue that the farmers' actions in the Netherlands mimic previous protests around the world and could foreshadow similar uprisings against government overreach. For example, the so-called Yellow Vest movement in France began as a protest against increased nationwide fuel taxes. This is literally communism. The Dutch political commentator even told Fox News in an interview, if the state says we're going to take your private property away for the sake of the greater good, then the state has the prerogative to create crisis to strip you of your rights. That's what is happening here. Said the farmers' reaction to the government actions should absolutely be a warning for other governments pursuing similar agendas. This will definitely affect ordinary civilians, she continued. It's part of a global agenda, so everyone around the world, especially Western countries, should be aware that this is something that is not about Dutch government. It's part of the 2030 agenda. This is part of the Great Reset. So with that being said, Great Reset, food insecurities, food shortages, If you want more information, today's paid sponsor is thesolutionevent.com. It's pretty crazy times. We live in crazy, crazy times. And I have a feeling that things are just going to get so much more crazy over the next 6 months to a year. Things are just going to get, it's going to, it's an exciting time to be alive, nonetheless. We're going to get to witness something that's going to be, this is going to redefine history, what we're going to be walking into over the next, short while. We're going to be watching history unfold. It's already unfolding, but there's so many people that are just in denial about what's happening right now. A large block of the population is, because it's just more comfortable. Who wants to, realize what's actually happening? Who wants to really digest the truth? Not that many, right? And so you have a large block of the population that's just saying, you know what, I'm just going to completely write it off, forget it. Those people aren't going to have an option soon. Everyone's going to be waking up to this, because when they start going to the grocery store, then there's less and less and less food. And then you end up buying a drink, and a drink's $6, $8, $10. And you start realizing, you know what? I'm making $50,000, $60,000 a year. Yeah, rent's going up, everything's going up. But, before I was able to buy groceries. Now I'm, doing a potluck. Now I'm doing, trying to, work with other people to where we can, pitch in money together. That this is what's going to happen. If food shortages really hit, like Larry Fink and people are saying that they're going to hit, and food inflation starts to really skyrocket, what are people going to do? Because there's only so much credit that you have on a credit card, that anyone has on a credit card. And if they can't make the payments and the credit cards get maxed out, it's going to be harder for them to get access to credit lines. So obviously there's going to be longer bread lines. There's going to be people trying to work together, community-like potluck environments. We're going to start to see things that people would think is just never, not possible here in America or in the Western countries. It's going to happen. It will happen. We're witnessing the early stages of it. What do you think about this entire situation? Drop your comments below. Hit the like button. Subscribe here. Subscribe also on my second channel. It's going to be an interactive call-in show. I'm going to do it from Italy. I'm going to be leaving in the next few days, so I'm going to do this call-in show from overseas. The call-in might actually be more of a challenge, but I'm going to try to figure out a way to make that happen while I'm overseas. But it's going to be a really cool environment, so make sure you subscribe down below, top comment. And LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok up in the banner. Drop your comments below. What do you think about this? Are you writing off this situation of what Larry Fink is saying about, that he worries about food? The one thing I worry about is that we don't talk enough about is food, right? Do you believe this guy? Drop your comments below. Where do you see this going? I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you're interested in being sponsored on my YouTube channel, visit cashnow.video/sponsor and fill out the application.